Thank you very much indeed, the One Big Church team. And the inspiration behind the drama, Mr. Neil Wise. Well done, Neil. Thank you for pulling that together. Okay, so if you haven't wondered, if you haven't thought, we are focusing on the story of the feeding of the 5,000. So thank you for listening to me, and good night. Oh, I think I've got my pages the wrong way around. You see, Esther, it can happen to anybody. I do apologize. Okay, so this is probably one of the most well-known stories in the Bible. Do you know that TV program, Tenable? Anybody watch Tenable? No? Where you got to get the top 10 answers of a thing. And this is probably number 2 on the list, I would say. I would say turning the water into wine is probably the most well-known of the miracles. Feeding of the 5,000 probably second. And you know, what's unique about this particular story is that it is the only one of Jesus' miracles which is recorded for us in all 4 of the Gospels. It's in Matthew 14, Mark 6, Luke 9, and John 6. So there must be something quite important about this story that we need to be getting a hold of. And when you read the different versions in the 4 Gospels, you get a slightly different version of the story, but they all fit together to create the story and the miracle that we've been thinking about this morning. So in all of the records, we read about the crowds that came. We read that there were 5,000 men. We read about the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. We read about Jesus giving thanks for the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And we read about the 12 baskets of leftovers. But only Luke doesn't talk about there being a boat. Okay, so the three of the Gospels refers to Jesus going out on a boat. Luke doesn't talk about a boat. Matthew is the only one who tells us there was any women and children there. So there was 5,000 men and women and children alongside that. Matthew and Mark set it in the context of the beheading of John the Baptist, and they record that Jesus went out to a solitary place. And only John talks about the little boy with the packed lunch. Only John talks about the little boy, and yet he's probably the one that we remember most from the story. So, we're thinking about the verse in 1 Corinthians 11, which is following Christ's example. So what is the example of Christ in this miracle? Well, firstly, what we have in the story is it's tinged with sadness because Jesus has just told about the death of John the Baptist. And this, I think, shows Jesus as wholly human and wholly divine. Jesus got sad, like we get sad, and he wanted to go to a solitary place. He wanted to get away from it all for a little bit while he just got sad about the news that he had about John the Baptist. So it's okay to get sad, is what I'm saying. It's okay to be fed up in various circumstances. But then the crowds came after him. The crowds just followed Jesus. The crowds just went to Jesus. And Jesus had compassion on them. Jesus felt their need. Now imagine Jesus' position here. He's just, a little while ago, preached the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah? Everybody remember the Sermon on the Mount? Do you remember the Sermon on the Mount? Yeah? So Jesus has just preached the Sermon on the Mount. And he has these 5,000 men, maybe an equal number of women, maybe an equal number of children, maybe 15 to 20,000 people sat in front of him, all hungry, wanting food. And he said, I know what I'll do. He'll say to them, right, I've just told you about the Sermon on the Mount. Can the peacemakers put up their hands? Yeah, the peacemakers, don't worry, there'll be no trouble in you coming first. Peacemakers, I want you first. You sit over here. Then he says, the pure in heart. Can I have the pure in heart next? Any pure in heart? Yeah, okay, you know there's no sin in being called first. Come on, you come and sit over here. The meek, the meek here. Don't be shy. Oh, you know what? That's not what it means. Come on, don't be shy, the meek. Come on. Okay, we sit here. And then he goes through all of the 9 Beatitudes. And for the rest who don't get called, he said, right, you lot can go home. Because you obviously haven't been listening to a word I've been saying. You just go home, clear off. I'm not going to feed you. I'm just going to feed these guys here who have listened to what I've had to say and have responded positively to the word that I've been preaching all along. Jesus didn't do that. Jesus didn't know the makeup of the crowd that was in front of him. Well, he probably did. But there were probably thieves in there. There were probably liars in there. There were probably people who were in inappropriate relationships. There were people who were worshiping other gods, and maybe even there were people who wanted to do Jesus harm. So it was an eclectic bunch of people who were stood before Jesus, but he wasn't selective about who he was going to feed that day. He was going to feed every single one of them. There was no judgment, there was no condemnation, and there was no reward at that time for those who had decided to follow Jesus wholeheartedly. He fed them all. He had compassion enough for the 15 to 20,000 people who were there to feed them all. And you know, the 12 baskets of the leftovers that we see in front of us speaks of the fact that there's enough compassion for everybody, not just for the 15 to 20,000 who were sat in front of Jesus, but there were 12 baskets of stuff left over as compassion for others. Jesus' compassion for you and for me does not limit his capacity to have compassion for other people. Do the maths. The second round, there would have been 144 baskets. The third round, 1,728 baskets. The fourth round of compassion, 20,736 baskets left over. There's always going to be exponential growth in Jesus' compassion. There is no limit to the compassion that Jesus has for us and for all people. And in the same way as Jesus had compassion on everyone without showing any partiality that day, Jesus is asking us, as we follow his example, to have compassion without partiality. It's not our job to ask any questions when we are in a position of serving others. It's not our job to make judgments about where people are when we are showing our compassion. And it's definitely not our job to dish out condemnation to people as we are serving others with the compassion of Jesus. Do you remember the story of the woman who was caught cheating on her husband with another person, obviously? Don't know where the other person had gone to, but it was only the woman that was brought before Jesus. And the leaders were there saying, she needs to be stoned because she's cheated on her husband. And Jesus said, okay, tell me which one of you here is without sin, who can then cast the stone on this lady for her inappropriate relationship. And of course, they could not say that any of them were free of sin. And each one of them, from the oldest to the youngest, walked away. And Jesus said to her, where are your condemners? Where are those who condemn you? And she said, well, there's nobody here. And Jesus said, beautiful, lovely words. He said, neither do I condemn you. But he didn't finish there. He said, go and sin no more. So he was true to the word of the Lord, of the gospel, of God the Father, that she was to leave her life of sin. But at that moment, he did not condemn her. He did not say, you deserve to die. He gave her another opportunity. And we need to show that compassion. And for the adults in the room, you remember the outcome of the Asher's baking trial about the cake that was produced by that company. The issue was never about providing that cake. The issue was about what was written on the cake. So we should never feel it appropriate to discriminate or to condemn or to give a different service to people because they happen not to agree with the gospel that we love and hold dear. But we should always hold true to the faith and to the word of the Lord. So we need to be compassionate and hold on to the word of the Lord. So, finally, we're not talking here about massive acts of kindness. We're talking about small acts of kindness. 5 loaves and 2 fish in a box is all Jesus needed to bless and have compassion on a large number of people on that day. You might think it's a pity that only John recorded the story of the boy. He didn't get much notoriety. We don't even know the boy's name. He was just a boy. But what he saw that day was a miracle that Jesus was able to achieve on the basis of his gift of 5 loaves and 2 fish. He went away, I'm sure, absolutely amazed. Imagine the number of people he told that story to down the years of his life. He went away knowing that his little gift was used mightily for God's service and for God's compassion. And we need to find ways, brothers and sisters, how we can show compassion to others. What we do with our hands on a day-to-day basis, with our finances, bringing the tithes into the storehouse and seeing God multiply what the work in this place. Being kind to one another, providing where someone is without, doing small acts of kindness. And in 2 Corinthians 9 and verse 7, we read this: each of you should give what you have and what you have decided, not reluctantly and not under any compulsion. So we should do it freely and happily and ensure that we are doing it unto the Lord. Because when we do that, God can do mighty things with the gift that we have laid into his hands. We're going to see a video just now which just shows you the power of a little act of kindness and how it can create a chain reaction of kindness. Thank you, team.